Hey guys, so it's early Saturday morning, just got up and I'm about to put this 1.25 inch Teraflex body lift on my Jeep. It already has a 2.5 inch budget boost and 33 inch tires, and I just want a little extra clearance. So I decided this would be a good route to go. That's inexpensive and I could easily do myself, hopefully easily. According to the videos I watched, it's pretty simple. Basically what you do is there's 10 body mounts underneath the Wrangler. You unbolt the bolts and jack up the Jeep one side at a time and slip these little spacers in between, and then you slide these new bolts that are longer through the body mount, tighten them down, do the same thing to the other side, jack the other side up and all that, slide them in, bolt them down, and then your Jeep is 1.25 inches higher. There's really not too many downsides to this because it doesn't affect the suspension at all. It's not giving you any more suspension clearance. It's just lifting the body off the frame. So really the only downside I've heard from people is that it leaves a gap between the bumpers and the body because the bumpers are connected to the frame, and so those aren't getting lifted up with the body. There's like a relocation bracket you can get for the rear bumper. Haven't seen anything for the front unless you just get like an aftermarket bumper. But I'm not going to make like a real long video about this, but I'll kind of briefly show you the steps and what I'm doing. Okay, so the instructions first say to block off all the wheels. Did that first, and then it says start on the driver's side of the Jeep, or the left side, which I'm assuming is the driver's side, and take an 18mm socket and loosen all of the body mount bolts. So I already did that. Let me just show you where those are at least on this 2015. There are 3 right on this side. One is right there. If you move down a little bit, there's a second one. A third one's right behind this front wheel. Oh, that's not it. There it is. And then there's a nut. Doesn't look quite the same. Right there that you loosen. And there's one more on the rear, right by the exhaust. So that's 5. On, I guess, older models, there's like one more, even a little bit below this back, or in front of this back one. So I loosened all those, and then on this side, it says to take them all off because that's the side you're jacking up first. So I took off this rearmost one that was right there. And then a couple other ones in the middle didn't quite come out all the way, even though I loosened them as much as I could. So I'm hoping when I lift it up, those will drop out, or I'll be able to pull them out, but I'll let you know how that goes. Basically, I got a setup. I'm gonna put some 4x4s in the jack to hopefully get enough height to be able to jack this thing up off the frame. So I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so 20 minutes later, I was able to get the 2 stuck body mount bolts out, basically by pulling down on the washer with one hand and then taking my impact driver with the 18mm and turning that left while I pulled down. That seemed to catch it back on the threads enough to unloosen it. So all of the mounts are out on this side, and basically what I have set up, because you need to get this thing really high, I'm realizing, is I put the jack on 4x4s, which are really strong, definitely not going to break. And then I even had to stack some 4x4s and also cut them a little longer so that it would distribute the weight on the body and not just dent one section. And basically I'm going to lift that up, and we have to lift it high enough for that nut, or this where the nut threads, to be up here so that I can slide another mount in there. So it's got to get pretty darn high. I already lifted it once and had to put another block of wood in because I realized it wasn't going to be high enough. So I'll let you know how this goes. As you can see, this thing's pretty jacked up right now. Had to use 3 boards on top of the jack as well as those 4x4s below. The hardest one was definitely lifting it high enough to get the spacer underneath that bolt right there. So I lowered it a little bit just to hold the spacer in place, and then was able to slide all the other ones in from there. The back one was a little tricky too. Now I'm going to lower them down and tighten up this side. All in on this side. It was definitely more of a challenge than I thought. I was able to thread in all of the bolts on this side, but there's one in the back too, but I couldn't get the nut to line up underneath this mount because I don't know if I can get you to see it or not, but it's too far to that end. So I did what the instructions said and just finger tightened this side, and then I went to the other side and completely removed all the body mount bolts. I'll lift that side up, and I'm kind of just hoping this front will realign a little bit better so I can get that nut in. Otherwise, I'll figure something out. But another thing that was a little challenging was in the back on the 2015 models, there's a bigger bolt. I don't know what the diameter is, but you'll notice that it's not the same as the ones in the front. The bolt's a little bit thicker. Here's the original one. And then some of these, this is like a smaller one. It's not quite as thick. So you gotta make sure you get the right thickness for these back ones near the exhaust. But I also had to use a mallet to just kind of pound it up there to catch on the threads because it was just spinning for a while and it was quite frustrating. But got that overcome, and it's threaded into there now. And now I'm gonna work on the other side, and hopefully I'll be able to get those front ones aligned at the end of this. So I'll keep you updated. Quick note, when I lifted up this side, the opposite side, it shifted over this front one just enough to where I could get that nut in underneath. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. I was just able to get a couple threads in. Now I'm gonna do the exact same thing on this side that I did to the other side. Lift it up, slide those spacers in. Okay, so the body lift is completely done now. Took longer than I expected. Ended up taking almost 3 hours, but just because there was some tricky things going on. Anyways, after I finished the passenger side and, like I said, went over to the driver's side, that went way quicker just because this other side was already up where it needed to be, and then I was kind of basically just leveling it all out, so it was way easier to line up everything than on this side. So after I popped all the spacers in, did the exact same thing on the driver's side that I did the passenger side. I tightened them as much as I could with just a 1/2-inch wrench, and then I used a torque wrench, and it said 80 foot-pounds for all the back ones, all the back bolts, and then for the 2 nuts in the front, 75 foot-pounds. So it's all torqued up, and let me just show you what it looks like now afterwards. Okay, here's the front. I think it looks really good. There's a little bit of gap now between the front bumper and where the grille is, but you can barely even see it through this camera right here. The whole Jeep is clearly higher. I think that 1.25 inch kind of made it exactly where I wanted it. It's way above me now. I mean, I'm only 5'8"-ish, so it doesn't take much, but now from here you can see it definitely raised those wheel wells quite a bit, and it really doesn't look bad at all. I mean, the few things that people said about the bumper gap and you can see more of the frame, I do notice that, but nothing that I think the average person would notice when you're driving by or even while it's parked. If you look back here, this is where I might consider getting some of those body lift gap guards. Just because of that little space there, I could just get some to cover it, or you just get bigger tires. But I just got these, so I'm not going to do that. And then you could also get that thing I mentioned that'll lift this gap with the bumper. But again, I'm not in really a rush to do that. I don't think it looks bad at all. And I imagine also then there will be a little gap between the bumper and the hitch. Don't know how I'll feel about that. But I really like how this turned out. Like I said, this other side was much easier once you have the other side on the spacers. So there it is. And just a few tips I'll give you as well for just to kind of recap what helped me getting this project done. So the 3 main issues I ran into that I didn't find on like the forums or anything was one, trying to get the bolts out, the body mount bolts out. Some of them just kept spinning. Like I said earlier, what I did was I had to pull down on them, like on the actual washer, while using my impact driver to spin them, and then they eventually came out. And then the other issue was getting some of them back in. Some of them didn't want to catch on the threads. What actually helped was kind of sticking them in there as much as I could and then banging with a rubber mallet on the back of them. Somehow that eventually helped it catch enough to where I could tighten it back in with the new bolts that Teraflex provided. And then the other main issue was those front nuts, getting them back lined up with the bolt while I was lowering down. The main thing there, I would say, is if you can't line it up when you're doing the first side, just tighten all the other ones, not completely tight, it says leave them loose, but thread them all in, and then don't worry about that front one, jack up the other side, and then that'll help align this front one to where you can just finger tighten it while you put the spacers in on the driver's side. So, and then once you do all that, you just tighten them all up. It's a breeze after that. The main thing I think I did well that I prepared for before I got the lift was I cut up all those 4x4s. I kind of figured out the spot that I was going to lift it from, basically right under kind of this door here. You'll see that in the beginning part of the video. And then just make sure you have plenty of wood and a good 3-ton jack so you can get easily the amount of height you need. I think that if I would have started this with just the jack and like one 4x4, I would have been really upset because I would have gone to the hardware store to get more wood or something else to jack it up higher. So just make sure you got plenty of 4x4s and 2x4s. It says to use those in the instructions. Watch the Teraflex video. It's somewhat helpful, but they use a lift and they got the pole jack, so it's much easier for them to do it than while we're on the ground trying to, make it work. But this is certainly easier than a suspension lift. The fact that I was able to get it done in under 3 hours. Really doing it again, I could probably do it in 45 minutes now that I know what to do, but I have never done one before, so this was the first time, and I'm sure it'll be the first time for a lot of you guys. And I haven't seen many videos, regular guys doing this on a JK, just in their driveway. Most of the other ones were professionals in a shop on a lift. So if you have any questions or comments about this, leave them down below and I will respond. All right, guys, hope that was helpful. Have a good one.